Hello, I'm Sanj and welcome to the Future of Wellbeing, where today we have a very special guest who's going to share all their insights on wellbeing with me and with you. Get ready, get excited, and I'll see you on the other side. So thank you so much, Raj Kotecha, for deciding to join us today on the Future of Wellbeing. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today, Raj. I know you're a very busy man, so I'm conscious of your time. But context for everybody who's watching and listening to this, Raj, you and I met, it was almost 4 years ago now in Dubai, pre-beard time in Dubai. And you were the first person who introduced me to Gary Vaynerchuk. First of all, thank you very much. That has changed my life in so many ways. Second of all, you were one of the first people who believed in me, and you inspired me to take this leap. You didn't really see it as a risk at that point in time. I remember you saying things to me like, Sanj, you're going to be working for 50 years. Is it more of a risk for you to stay in a job and a career that you're not fulfilled in? Isn't that more of a risk than trying to be the best version of you? So I really remember those conversations with a fond heart. We've kept in touch over these last 2-3 years since I've left Dubai, and I'm really grateful for all the support you have. So Raj, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the Future of Wellbeing. How are you?
Well, thank you so much. I'm really well. Thank you for asking, and thank you for all those kind words. And I also remember those kind of like pivotal moments in your career and in our friendship. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to see you here, and congratulations on the PhD and traveling the world and following your heart. You really made a lot of progress in a short period of time, and that leads to the conclusion, at least in my head, that this is only the beginning. So pleasure to be here, and very happy to participate in this conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Raj. So first question I'd love to ask you, Raj, is, well-being is a term that has been thrown around everywhere, more so during the pandemic, but let's get straight into it. What does the term well-being mean to you, Raj? And when was the phase or period of your life where you started to prioritize your well-being?
So I think the term well-being to me, it's a great question. I think to me, it feels like...
Oh, no, sorry. Let's go back. Sorry.
Yeah.
Who is Raj? Raj, could you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, who am I? Okay. So my name is Raj Kotecha. I'm based out of Dubai, originally from the UK. Typical East African Indian kids story. So parents are from Kenya, grandparents from India. Born and raised in a shop. So always around business, always around the kind of cash register ringing. Grew up quite poor in a working class area in West Manchester. So seen a fair bit of fights and violence and stuff like that. But education was always key in the house. And so I found myself going to university. Very grateful that I kind of got to live above a shop in a 2-bedroom place. We had 7 people in the house, me, my little sister living in the living room, sleeping in the living room, my uncle, my mom, my dad, my grandma, and my grandfather. So close-knit family. Went to university at 18, having grown up in the boiler room that is, a corner store, constantly working in there nights and weekends. When I got to university, it was the first year that they started introducing school fees. So the first year that universities became chargeable in the UK, I realized that I would need money to pay those fees off because I didn't come from a wealthy family. I always loved music, was always listening to music in the shop, didn't realize how much music I'd picked up on. And when I was 18 years old in Freshers Week, first week of university, saw a number on the back of a flyer, went out to meet a promoter, asked the promoter, what would it take for me to come to this party for free? He said, if you can sell some tickets, we'll give you a free ticket. So I went back to my building. There was 250 rooms, over 1,000 kids living in there. Started making my way from the top of the building and walking down the fire exits, knocking on every single door, trying to sell tickets. Became known as a ticket seller for all the major promoters in Manchester. To do your own parties in Manchester was a bit of a risk because Manchester in the 90s and the early 2000s is very much about the streets and certain people having your back and stuff like that. But long story short, we figured that out, and I started doing my own parties, started DJing at my own parties because nobody was at the party when we first opened the doors, the early doors as they call it. So at that point, I kind of fell in love with DJing as well. I did my first degree in business and IT with management, wrote a thesis on mobile commerce and the future of apps and 3G and 4G back in 2000, 2001. 2003, did my second degree in technology management with a focus on acquisition and strategy. Terrible timing to be a technology academic because the NASDAQ crashed. And so there wasn't much of a market. I went over to Canada, started selling cell phones in Canada, which was something I'd done to fund myself through university. So I had a bit of a head start in my knowledge. became one of the top salespeople in the company. And I was asked what would I like, and I said I'd like 5 minutes with the CEO. Got the 5 minutes with the CEO. Told him that I want to work in the head office. Me and the guy who I was traveling with both got jobs. He was in sales. I was put on a very interesting project, which was to start the first independent ringtones portal. Wow. So I did that in Canada. That's how I got my relationship with Russell Peters and Cardinal Official. Came back to London. Before I came back to London, I was the face of Canadian Music Week. I was sponsored by Sony Ericsson, so I did a nationwide TV tour. Took that YouTube clip, came back to London, showed that to some people in the mobile content industry. Having done this TV tour, I realized the relationship between making video content and the opportunities that come to you. 2008, along came the iPhone. Mobile content became even bigger. I started making content at that point. And in 2008, I was just finished a period of time working for a startup in Los Angeles. The Guardian bought us for several $1 million. I was employee number 6. I had share options. Took that money, went to Australia, realized that the thing I've loved doing my whole life is making content. I wanted to create some sort of content, role. Came up with the name Creative Content Agency, went back to the hostel, registered the business, came back to the UK, told people that they should make content, KPMG, Deloitte, Accenture, got laughed out of every office for 3 or 4 years. But along came the e-commerce world, and e-commerce has a feverish appetite for content, images, videos, things like that. Made thousands of pieces of content for various e-commerce players, like number 1 players in the UK. And then really after a period of time, just got bored of living in London. I'd done 10 years at that point. Came to Dubai to host a panel with YouTube, Sephora, and Huda Beauty. Came off stage. Loads of people gave me their business cards. I was like, wow, Dubai's got a really big appetite for business. Decided to make the move. Been here 6 years. Run my agency from here. Got amazing clients. Obviously, content and social media has gone through the roof in the last 10 to 14 years. And in some ways, I'm very much out there. Like I've got a brand called My Friends, Your Friends, where we connect. So far, we've connected 3,000-4,000 people in Dubai, helped them make friends, various different things. I still DJ. So in many ways, I'm kind of like really well known in that space. And in many ways, I'm not known at all because I'm a ghost producer for some really good CEOs and founders here. So I kind of like that balance, right? When I get to turn it on, I can turn it all the way on and I can be stood on a bar in the Burj Khalifa talking to 500 people. But in other ways, I can just be, as you see me today, just scruffy, working on my dining table, working on dope content. So yeah, that's my life in a nutshell. Maybe that's not the long version. That's not the short version. That's the medium version. I hope it applies some context.
No, absolutely. I think the main thing there is you're a pioneer, Raj. You've been ahead of the game. I know you love the phrase "the game," and you've been ahead of that. You've been shaping that. You've been contributing to the world as it is today. And to have that foresight of, it's worth millions, isn't it? That foresight of what will be, in 2020, what will, how many people will use a phone, and to write a piece on 3G and 4G back in the early 2000s. Again, I can see why you would have been laughed at, out of these boardrooms. But to get where you are now and to have the clients you have now, and to have the confidence that you have now is amazing. So huge shout out also to My Friends, Your Friends in Dubai. I've been to that event several times when I lived in Dubai and absolutely loved it. It was the mix of people in My Friends, Your Friends was something that I craved for. And if I was, I just moved to Dubai, it'd be the first event I wish I'd gone to.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I forgot to give a shout out as well to probably one of the other brands that I'm well known for, which is VaynerWorld. We launched 2 or 3 books for Gary Vaynerchuk. No, we launched 2 books for Gary Vaynerchuk. Interviewed him 6 times. Definitely like he is, along with my dad and my granddad and the people that I grew up with doing business, he's definitely like the dominant operating system for the way that I conduct myself in business. So yeah, that's it. That's me.
No, amazing. Thanks so much, Raj. And the beautiful thing about Raj is, we could converse for hours, and and unfortunately we don't have hours today. We have previously. I remember that night we sat in somewhere in Business Bay where you were going to host one of your My Friends, Your Friends events.
Yeah, Morimoto in Renaissance Hotel. Yeah.
Yeah, you just told me to go for it, man, and I've not looked back since that day. So, very special place in my heart, Raj. First question, and coming back to the discussion today, but what does well-being mean to you? And when was a phase of your life where you started to prioritize your well-being? And I have to again give a shout out here to vitamin D, because I know that will have an element of your well-being included.
Yeah. No, I definitely had vitamin D deficiency. A lot of people in Dubai do, unfortunately, and I took some supplements and I'm feeling great again. No, I think look, well-being is we just flip the word around. It's just being well, right? And I think when you ask people how you doing, and say, yeah, I'm doing well. In many cases they're not. And I think truly being well or having a sense of well-being is knowing that overall you're doing much better than you're doing worse. And it's not as if every day's perfect and people carry around a lot of stress, and you never know behind somebody's curtains what's going on in their lives, personally or otherwise. But for me, I think well-being is probably, if it's one thing that you can kind of focus on, it's worthwhile. And sometimes it can be mental well-being. Sometimes you can switch over to physical. Sometimes it can be relationships, nutrition, career. I think it's just a really good umbrella term where you can kind of go up to 35,000 feet, bird's eye view, look back down and say, okay, well, what elements of my life are going in the direction that I want them to, and which ones aren't, and then shifting your focus. So for me, that's well-being. It's just a sense of overall being happy, grateful, and everything is generally working the way that it should, which it never is. But that well-being would be the blanket term, at least the way I would think about it.
Yeah, fantastic. And then what period of your life would you say that you started to prioritize your well-being?
So when I was in 2012 or 13, I got whooping cough as an adult. So whooping cough, as you know, is a very difficult respiratory disease that kills lots and lots of babies. You don't really get it in adults, but I got it. And, even though I worked hard and between the DJing and the corporate work and traveling all over the world, there was many times where I'd get exhaustion. It would be like dehydration or something like that. Go to the hospital, intravenous in your veins, and now you're back up and running again. But I think when I got whooping cough, and again, it's not something I brought on, it's just something freakishly that one in every few thousand people gets every few years. I got it, and I'd wake up in the morning, brush my teeth, and then have to lie on the couch looking at the ceiling, getting my energy up so I can then go and make breakfast, eat breakfast. All my energy's gone, lie on the couch, wake up, do a little bit of work. All my energy's gone, lie back on the couch again. So I think for me, when I realized well-being is important is when I didn't have it. And when I'm lying up at the ceiling being like, you know what, I've got a beautiful house in London, I've got a beautiful car, life is good, but I can't function. I can't get off this couch. And so I was like, well, what do I need to do to avoid this happening again? And even though whooping cough wasn't something I brought into my world, I did become conscious of all the other things that can make you trip up. Now, do I still overwork? Yes. Is every element of my health the best? No. But I'm definitely a lot more conscious of it. I'm definitely much more conscious of when I'm going at full pace. And I love this lyric from a guy called Fonte. He was like, sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel is a train. And so you think you're coming out of the tunnel, and what you're really doing is running towards a train. And so I think I'm able to spot the difference now when you're deep in your work, or you're in a quote unquote kind of like dark place where you've got a lot of stuff going on and you're running towards the light. You got to make sure that you're not running into something that can just put you in a worse situation.
No, love it.
So that's when I realized, I was like, look, just regular being tired is probably an early signal to something that could be a lot worse. That's
fantastic. And again, the reason I asked you that is because a lot of stuff that's happened over the pandemic, people have started to realize that, it's been a period of forced introspection for people with their lives, what they do, who they live with, who they, a word you would use, who they jam with, all these kinds of things, what are people actually doing with their lives? So people are introspecting about their well-being. So like you said, to look out for those warning signs and distinguish, whether that's a light or a train is a great analogy.
Yes, indeed.
Perfect. Second question then, Raj, is as somebody who, again, a pioneer, especially within Dubai, I know what you do in Dubai is very niche. It's become mainstream now, but when you started doing it, it didn't really exist in Dubai. Maybe it still doesn't to an extent. So in terms of the work that you do in terms of content creation and advisory for companies, for individuals, how has that work been impacted by the COVID pandemic? And how do you see the future of the work that you do in a post-COVID or living with COVID world?
So the way that the content industry has been impacted by COVID as pertains to my business, well, it's worth starting off looking at the four kind of pillars of area that my business operates in. So we have a native approach in our agency, which is called the 4 Ps of content. And when we work with clients, we think about how do you plan, produce, publish, and promote content. Now, planning content obviously is working in the hypothetical world and coming up with ideas and strategy and what you want to achieve and what you're prepared to do to get there and what's considered a good result. Produce is the production of content, so videos, images, graphics, text. Publish, getting the stuff online, and then promote, once it's online, getting people to look at it. The way we've been impacted is that I didn't realize, or maybe I did, but I just ignored it because we had last year, our business grew 5 times in revenue. Not last year. Last year was 2020 now. So the year before, 2019, business grew 5x in revenue. And I didn't realize on balance, how much of that was due to production. And so when the lockdown happened, we couldn't physically go on location and produce. We couldn't take cameras and be in close proximity to our clients. So we definitely saw a dip in revenue, a significant dip in revenue. But for us, as you mentioned, it's been a great time of reflection. So 2020, interestingly, was the year that I turned 40. And so I think that when you change decades, you know, when you go from 20 to 30 or 30 to 40, and you've got to sit down and have this global introspective period of COVID and being forced to be locked down, it makes you think a lot. And I realized that what I really enjoy doing is the pre-camera stuff, like the strategy and the script writing and all that kind of stuff. And that's a much more, it's a much more efficient part of the business because you're not going on location, right? So then the question is, how do I deliver my strategies at scale? And no matter who we work with, whether we work with a lawyer, a real estate agent, a consultant, a media personality, the first 2 to 6 months of working with them is getting them on board with the first principles of how we work, or what we call the 4 Ps of content. So our response to that is that we're putting a lot of that content online, and we're going to allow people at a much cheaper price to go through our strategies online through a series of videos. And then at various intervals, we will stop and we will have conversations with them and test them and help them produce certain content assets. And so we're a really expensive agency to work with on balance compared to most others. And so what it allowed us to do was innovate and say, okay, well, can we offload some of our strategy work onto the internet, let people buy that program for, you know, $500-600, and then just check in with us for the high value consultancy just when they need to. So that's one thing that we've done. So the business is called the Creative Content Agency. The program that we've developed is called Content Warriors. So we teach you the 4 Ps of content online. Then we check in with you and we clarify anything that didn't make sense. And then we give you one of 5 assignments. And then you do one of those 5 assignments. And then the second check-in is reviewing the assignment, making sure it's all good before you put it online. Then you put it online. And then the third check-in with you is looking at the results that you got. And so that program's called Content Warriors. At the moment, it's available by application only, but we will be opening that out to more and more people. It's looking like the wider opening of that will be March 2021. But we're really excited about it, dude, because, you know, now me and you can speak on Zoom. That's not something we could do a year ago, pre-COVID. Now these communication lines have opened up. And so versus just having the best and brightest clients in the UAE, now we can serve people in Malta, Miami, Madrid, Moscow. You know what I mean? Like, which really allows us to become a global business with this digital delivery option.
That's insane. And then, and going forward, you see that as, you know, you've been part of so much change, you know, through these decades, and so maybe do you think that going forward, you know, will it ever go back in terms of, you know, just serving Dubai clients, or will you think that because people are now so familiar with a Zoom, with understanding what they can do virtually and then meeting up if ever need be, do you think we'll kind of stick to a hybrid of both?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think about things in terms of going back and forth. I think about being in the present, and you play the business game in the present. So let's just go with a horrible hypothetical. Let's say that all of a sudden tomorrow the UAE says no more Zoom. I don't see that as a step backwards. I just see that as being the rule of the day. So in business, you wake up and you just play the cards that you're dealt. And if the cards are no more Zoom, okay, no more Zoom. If you're a real business person, an entrepreneur, you're going to make it work no matter what happens, because you never see yourself failing. You never see yourself giving up. So in the absence of all of those negative outcomes, you just got to make it work with whatever it is. So yeah, I don't see, but I also do hope, of course, from a commercial point of view, that all these communication lines stay open.
Yeah.
They don't. And I don't see it as a step backwards. It's just like, okay, wake up, play the cards you're dealt.
No, perfect. That's really useful, Raj. Coming on to a different facet of your life now, which is leadership. I know you spend a lot of time as a leader, you know, within your own team. I know you spend a lot of time with leaders, you know, and how they, you know, develop their plans and how they implement their own strategies. Yeah. What would you say your, you know, Raj Kotecha's 2 top tips for anybody listening, anybody who wants to be a fantastic leader? What 2 traits would a fantastic leader have?
The 2 top traits that I think any fantastic leader should have, or at least will allow them to get towards it, I think number 1 would be empathy, which is making sure that you're just as able to get into the mind of the person you seek to serve, whether you're trying to do right by your employees, whether you're trying to do right by your suppliers, your clients. I believe that empathy is probably one of the key the key facets, right? Because ultimately, the number one cause of conflict is two people seeing things differently. I heard this amazing thing when I was at high school or primary school. My teacher said, "What's the number one cause of car crashes?" And the answer was two cars trying to occupy the same space at the same time. And it just such a simple way of looking at things. And you think, okay, well, what is the cause of conflict in business? Is two people are trying to occupy an outcome their own way, and those two things conflict when they meet. So I think empathy is really, really good, because even if you stick to your guns and get your own way, you have the right amount of respect for the way that the other person looks at it, and whether you believe that's right or wrong kind of doesn't matter. It's what you do with their perspective. The second thing that I think makes a good leader is widening the aperture, like opening the timelines of when you look at something. So as you rightly said, when you and I first spoke, you're working for a blue chip company and you wanted to go into the wellness world. And I said, well, look, would you rather do something you want to do and see where that goes over a 50-year window? Or would you rather just carry on doing what you're doing until you eventually burn out at some point in that 50 years? And I think that one thing that can be a challenge for leaders, and ultimately you never want your leader to crumble. You never want them to get frustrated or disabled in terms of their ability to make decisions and lead, is when when their mind gets clogged up. And I think the way that you unclog it is you have to widen your lens out a little bit. You have to say, okay, well, look, this is a problem, but how does it play out over 50 years? Or how does it play out over 5 years? And yes, you've got to price in, in my world, technological changes. So, okay, can you really look at anything over a 5-year period without factoring in automated cars and 5G? No, you've got to price all that in. But more often than not, the thing that frustrates a leader or makes a leader not a good leader is they're looking at things in too small a window. And it's a case of just widening that out, like almost zooming out and saying, okay, well, come what may, no matter how bad a business problem is, life will eventually solve it.
Yeah.
Right? Like whether that means you going out of business and somebody else taking your place, and that doesn't mean that the solution was the right solution for you. But over a long period of time, all ripples in the water eventually flatten out. And so sometimes what you need to do is you need to zoom all the way out and say, okay, well, look, this is a problem, and it could lead to us having the worst year revenue wise, or the worst quarter revenue wise, or the worst 2 years, or we lose this employee. But if you widen out even wider, you zoom out even more, you can often find that things will even out. And it's about understanding the tipping point where things start to get well again and figuring out how you can bring that point forward. No,
I love it. As you were saying that, Raj, I had a flashback to that night in Dubai where you introduced me to the term breadcrumb fishing. When you just, similar theme, take that wider perspective, Sanj, throw everything out there, and wait and see which one bites, and then lean in towards that. And I think what you're sharing there in terms of a leadership, having that wider perspective, seeing what will happen is or knowing what will happen is unsure, but what can you do in this time to make sure that whenever these things do happen, you're in a better position to deal with them?
Yeah, people love the bread fishing analogy. And for your listeners that are not familiar with it, I tell people that come up with plans not to commit too much to any particular plan when it comes to content marketing. So some people might think, okay, I'm going to launch a video series that's aimed at this person, and when this person sees it, they're going to respond this way. Well, built into that hypothesis is a series of assumptions, which is the person you want to talk to is X, the response you want is Y, and what you put in front of them is Z. But so that's like line fishing. You take your boat into the middle of the water, you drop your line in, and you've got a particular kind of bait on there to catch a particular kind of fish. When it comes to content strategy, what we believe is the right thing to do is breadcrumb fishing, which is don't take any lines or bait into the middle of the water. Take your boat into the middle of the water and throw breadcrumbs everywhere. Look at what fish come to the surface, analyze what's available, go back and get the bait for that particular kind of fish where it is in the water. So you might think, okay, I want salmon in this part of the lake. Yeah. But by the time you throw breadcrumbs everywhere, you realize there's some tuna in another part of the lake. So then you go back, you get your boat, you go get your bait for the tuna, and you go specifically there and just take the tuna out of the lake. And that's what I say to people is that don't overcommit until you've done a really, really broad hand approach to see who's interested in what you do, and then respond to that by going specifically after that opportunity. There's been industries that I've been in. I was running the media for a company called golfonline.co.uk for 3 years, and I've never played a game of golf in my life. I was doing the media for the Arabian Hotel Investment Conference and African Hotel Investment Forums and hotel investment forums in Europe for some of the biggest brands and leaders in the world. And if you told me at 25 years old that that's what I would be doing 10 years later, I'd say you're crazy. But it's only when I started putting my content out that those people came to the surface and told me they'd want to work with me, that I then had to open my mind and say, okay, well, let's give it a try. And having those conversations and being in those industries for 3 to 5 years has really given me a lot more versatility right now, where I can talk to people in their language because I went deep into that industry for a period of time. So that's the benefit of breadcrumb fishing.
No, I love it. Breadcrumb fisher for life, man. And then last question then. I know you've had so much exposure again, within your own company, one, but also you've worked with so many huge and successful individuals who lead companies, and also with companies in a broader sense in terms of multiple people within that same company. Yeah. As well-being is going to be, and it is a main topic or mainstream topic of conversation. It will be a bigger priority going forward. What would you say is the top tip that businesses and teams can do to sustain a culture of well-being?
What can businesses and what can businesses and teams do to sustain a culture of well-being? I think you've got to recognize the fact that the things that can cause somebody to not be well continue to increase. So your response to making well-being happen has to increase with it.
Nice.
So I'll give you an example. If you asked 100 teenage girls 15 years ago, how does the mobile phone in their pocket impact how they feel about themselves? They would say, well, my mobile phone is only used for email and texting. So it doesn't really have a bad impact. In fact, it's quite useful because I can tell my friends I'm running late for something. Today, if you ask a teenage girl or teenage boy, how does the phone and what is presented on that phone, how does it make them feel about themselves? They go, sometimes I feel okay, but sometimes I wish I had a six-pack. Or sometimes I feel okay, but my friends had a party 2 nights ago and I wasn't invited, and I watched the whole thing on Snapchat or TikTok. I feel pretty bad because I wasn't invited. So these are new actors or players that are attacking somebody's well-being, right? They're making them self-conscious. They give them a fear of missing out. They give them self-image issues. Of course, we know that it's led to suicide and self-harm numbers increasing. So I think as a leader, your responsibility is to always be aware of what the threats are, the new threats. Speaking specifically to a COVID and post-COVID world, you've got to look at people that have never ever felt lonely before now feeling lonely because they're locked down. I've got a very, very good friend who loves music and has been out listening to music, probably been to more gigs than any other human that I've ever met in my life. And for the first year ever, he's gone from extreme music consumption at concerts and festivals. We're talking about maybe 12 to 2 dozen big events a year, to being at home in a 1-bedroom flat. And this is not somebody who probably ever thought about, loneliness, and now is like, man, this kind of sucks. So these are new, I want to say they're almost like new characters that are the opposite of well-being, right? And they have an impact. And you need to now say, okay, well, what are my responses? So as a leader, particularly in business, you've got to say, well, okay, yes, there are new things attacking the well-being of the people that I care about, my employees, my staff, or whatever. Now, what are the new tools to help them overcome that? Is there a gifting platform where you send them some gifts? You can send them some healthy food items, or you can have a Zoom call, or you can do game nights, or you can show up at their window with a banjo and sing them a song. There's a million different ways that for every new thing that comes in and attacks somebody, that you can do something to help them and balance it out. And I'm very fortunate. None of those things have had an effect on me at all. Like my mindset is always like, coming from where I've come from, coming from Manchester in the 80s with, not having money and the violence and other things that I experienced, the racism. For me right now, you just saw where I live, like living above the water. If I complain, I'm an absolute asshole. Like I've got food in the fridge and a nice life and a good career, and I live somewhere nice. I should not ever complain ever again. But for everybody, it's not like that. And in fact, there are people that have got more than me that feel like they've got less. And so if you're responsible for somebody like that, it's about looking at, from a resource perspective, what can you do to assist that person and bring the best out of them?
Boom.
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks so much, Raj, for your time, Raj. I know it's incredibly valuable. I've learned a lot, and I can't wait to listen to this again. And I look forward to seeing you in Dubai one day.
I look forward to seeing you too. Yeah. Hopefully you'll come over, and I wish you the best with your PhD. I hope your family's doing well, and I really look forward to getting some quality time together when you get over here. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Raj.
Peace. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for watching The Future of Wellbeing, and I'd love to hear your comments and feedback in the sections below. Please also share this video with at least 3 friends who would find it useful. Until next time, and until the next very special guest, I wish you a fantastic day ahead. Take care, stay well, stay safe, and ciao ciao.